Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on the programs in genealogical research at Boston University. I am Sarah Davies, and I will serve as the moderator for today's session. We look forward to an informative and interactive session. Please ask questions by typing in the questions box located at the right-hand side of your screen. We will try to address all questions towards the end of the presentation. Thank you again for joining today. During today's presentation, we will cover the two programs at BU, Genealogical Essentials and the Certificate in Genealogical Research, including the curriculum areas, instructors, and how to register. We will have time at the end for questions and answers. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Melindy Lutz-Byrne, Program Director of BU's Genealogical Research Programs. In addition to being Program Director, Melindy has served as President of the American Society of Genealogists, as well as a co-editor of NGS Quarterly. Melindy is an accomplished author, editor, and lecturer. Melindy brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to Boston University. Melindy, thank you for joining today. I'll pass it over to you to discuss the programs.
My pleasure, Sarah. Thank you. And welcome to all of you who are attending. It's glad to see so many of you. And also hello to those of you who will be viewing this in the future as a recording. I hope that you'll come and see us when we appear at some of the upcoming programs around the country, especially Roots Tech in late February, early March in Salt Lake City. We'll have a booth there. Come by and see us. We'll also be in Grand Rapids, Michigan on May 2nd through 5th. Have a booth at the NGS Society, National Genealogical Society annual meeting. And there we are. I think that's at least a year ago, maybe earlier this year at the NERGC in Massachusetts, down at the bottom. So thank you. And next slide. Our next session is going to start in the spring semester, January 16th. Your enrollment deadline is December 15th. And these are the tuition sums for the two programs. Genealogy Essentials is 4 weeks, and the certificate is 15 weeks. There's your website to learn more. Next slide. There are over 3,000 graduates of this program since it started in 2009, and the alumni are an amazing group of very talented people. They've done a number of things completely separate from BU, all on their own, and it includes a very strong Facebook group, and which is public. You can view and ask questions about the program, and past students can answer you with specifics. They've also got an amazing listserv where people ask the most interesting questions and get answers from all over the world, because we've got students from 17 countries who are alums in all the continents except Antarctica now. Next slide. So here are our two programs. We'll do an overview of each one of them, and I encourage you to self-select between these based on your experience level. Essentials is going to be people who've got just a few years under their belt and really are just exploring and beginning with genealogy, and the certificate is for the more advanced student. Next slide. So here we are with Genealogical Essentials. It's got a lot of good hands-on practice, and as I said, it's 4 weeks. The first week is very interesting. If you haven't done this before, you really should. One of the hands-on items is to look yourself up on the internet in specific places, and you'll discover that everything that's on the internet is not true. And sometimes it's dramatic. And sometimes people who look at the missingmoney.gov site, which is one of the ones we ask you to look at, are surprised to find that they have lost track of some money that's waiting for them. And we've never yet had a class where there wasn't somebody who either had their own money or had a relative or friend that they knew for sure had money that was on that site. Worth your time to look at. Next slide. So one of the basic things that in Essentials is you learn about the genealogical proof standard, and the GPS is repeated all through this. If you already know about the GPS, that might be an indication that you're ready for the certificate program. Next slide. Tools and techniques will take you through several very useful websites and also ways of solving problems step by step. Next slide. The immigration and evidence is really quite fascinating if you haven't done a lot of work with that, and some people specialize in older records and don't have the excitement of the more modern ones. You'll get to see examples where after 1906, it's a very standard thing for the passenger lists, which are compiled at the port of departure, not where you arrive, will have questions answered like, how much money do you have in your pocket? Where were you living just before you left? Who were you living with? Who are you going to meet when you reach America? And the similar information that you may never have imagined you would learn. Next slide. So once you've completed the Essentials course, you will be very well set to go forward to the certificate program, especially if you've got some experience working with records. You're going to have some practice. It's not so much watching somebody lecture as reading and doing exercises and then discussing in group discussions. So if you've mastered the things here, including the GPS, you'll be interested in continuing to our certificate program. Next slide. The Essentials books are two very standard texts that have a lot of respect in the field. The first is Val Greenwood's book, which has been around since the 1970s and is in a brand new third edition that covers all kinds of things from paper records in courthouses to the internet, and a very complete book about internet genealogy. Everything Guide to Online Genealogy is Kimberly Powell's book, and we make good use of that as well. You may already have these books. The older editions of Val Greenwood's book should not be used. You should use the most recent one. And I think there's just the one edition of the Everything Guide, so you're okay with that. Next slide. All right, let's move on to the certificate course. This is the one that I was mentioning before. We've got over 3,000 graduates now. It's taught by nationally recognized experts, and we make good use of the GPS, and it is 5 modules. Each one has deadlines and grading, and we're going to go through these modules one by one. Next slide. The people who usually take this course are students with an active interest in quality research. We've had many librarians, we've had many lawyers, we've had a retired rear admiral who was called back into the Middle East in the middle of one class. We've got everybody from, at one time we had a Harvard Medical School organ donor tracer who really got a lot out of the class. And what I'm waiting for is a journalist. We would think that with all the skills that journalism and genealogy have in common, we might have some journalists, but it was only in the last class that we've had even one journalist. Next slide. Among our alumni are some recognizable faces. This is Mary Tedesco with several nice quotes about her experience with the certificate program. Mary went on to be a co-host of the PBS TV series Genealogy Roadshow, which films all over the country and solves all kinds of problems. She came in as an Italian specialist and has spent quite a lot of time in front of the cameras sharing her knowledge with people who watch the program. Next slide. Michael McClellan also has things to say about what he learned and why he took the course. Michael's a professional genealogist who went on to join a number of local genealogy societies and is currently serving as the treasurer of the Massachusetts Society of Genealogists. Next slide. So the Essentials program has no prerequisites, but the certificate program does. You do need to have basic computer literacy skills, and you do need high-speed internet access. We're not yet able to do mobile device only presentations, so you need a laptop or desktop computer. You also need to have good written English skills. We've had quite a number of students who do not have English as a first language, and they have all been successful, so it is possible to do it with the help of a little Google Translate. We have a need for you to be familiar with certain kinds of records. You need to know where to go to find a marriage record or a deed, things like that. Not really detailed things, but you need to have at least a working vocabulary in that area. One of the ways you could become familiar with that would be to take a few of the large genealogical journals that have been around for a long time and read some recent issues. I recommend the New England Historical and Genealogical Register, the National Genealogical Society Quarterly, or the American Genealogist as three good ones that demonstrate a lot of the things that are being done currently. You should have tried to solve a few genealogical mysteries before you take this class too, so that you have some familiarity with the kinds of problems and the kinds of ways you solve them, and we'll teach you a lot more. You might also want to go to some of the local meetings or conferences. National conferences are pretty impressive things with lectures that might raise your awareness for what's being done in the field. And we'll teach you to use a lot of databases, but if you'd like to look in on one that's completely free before you take the class, I recommend FamilySearch.org, O-R-G, and it's completely free it has geographically based record sets that you can search either by browsing or by entering names. And you can see the wealth of things that's out there. Next slide, please. So the first module is 2 weeks, and it's foundations, and it covers these topics very well. You may see quite a lot about archives in this module, and you are assigned the one task that requires you to leave the house, and that is you must go to an archive and interact with an archivist to examine some unpublished documents, and then you write a repository report about those documents. The repository report is due at the beginning of the 5th module, so about 13 weeks later. So you've got plenty of time to pick your own archive and to choose what document that's never been published, it's not online, and to write about your experiences. So you'll be introduced to the GPS and have several readings and several group discussions about those principles, as well as discussion about the role of the genealogist. Next slide. Module 2 is 4 weeks long. Problem-solving techniques and technology. It takes you through quite a number of online websites where you solve problems, you track certain individuals, and you get walked through some examples. And then at the end, there's an extra credit scavenger hunt where you use what you've learned to answer 5 or 10 questions and get extra points when you're right. Next slide. Module 3, Evidence Evaluation and Documentation, is the most difficult module. It's 4 weeks, and in the bell curve, it's the top. The first 2 modules gain in complexity. Module 3 is quite tough. Then Module 4 and 5 are the downward part of the bell curve. You will look at published work and understand how citations are used and how evidence is queried, how you determine whether something is original or derivative, whether the informant is dependent or independent. The sources are distinguished carefully, and in writing your citations, you learn how to make it clear enough that someone reading that citation can evaluate whether you're looking at an appropriate piece of evidence and can go and find that piece of evidence by reading what you've written. Next slide. Module 4 is Forensic Research. It's 3 weeks, and that's a picture of me quite a few years ago now, out looking up evidence. And I know it doesn't look like it, but I am standing in the middle of an African-American graveyard just inside the city limits of Richmond, Virginia. And that's kudzu that's all over those gravestones. There's a volunteer group that comes every week for the last 11 or 12 years, and they cut that kudzu back, which is why it doesn't all look like the trees beyond, where there are even more gravestones in even worse condition. But once I got that gravestone uncovered, it was from 1965. That stuff grows very fast, and this is not the only graveyard like this. But Virginia is a closed record state, And if you want to know something about somebody in recent years, you need a source like an obituary or a gravestone to get you past the closed records laws so that you can do research. Among the things that we talk about are the ethical considerations of working with the living. My definition of forensic genealogy is the study of identity and kinship as it pertains to the law, and you'll get quite a lot of that in that module. Next slide, please. This is a readout of chromosome 13 for an individual who's taken the autosomal DNA test through one of the big 3 testing companies. In Module 4, we do an autosomal DNA case of adoption, where we started not knowing the mother or father of an individual who's in her 80s and has given permission for her research to be done on her results. And so this is all the matches that she received on chromosome 13, and each color means something, each placement on this graph means something, and we step you through this, and from the very beginning we've gotten clues. We've solved the identity of this woman's mother. A very emotional and ethically challenging case. We're currently working on the identity of her father. Next slide. The 5th and final module in the certificate course is professional genealogy, where you learn about client relations. You turn in your repository report. You get to share, if you wish, your repository results with your classmates. You will have been in a group setting with your classmates, something on the order of 25 to 35 people in a group, and you will be amazed at the things that they studied and sharing, and how wonderful the added encouragement is when you do discuss these things. You get a review about the BCG certification requirements, and you get some directions to other educational venues. For instance, quite a number of our students, after they graduate, will go on to something called a ProGen study group. Likewise, we've got a lot of people who've already taken that who come to us afterwards, so it fits in both places. Next slide. Our textbooks are the Genealogy Standards book that came out in 2014. This is a small book. It's only about 80 pages, but those standards are the things we teach to, and it's a really handy thing to have. We use the information in Evidence Explained, Professional Genealogy, Mastering Genealogical Proof, and Genetic Genealogy in Practice. Those last 2 are workbooks where you read a chapter and you go to the back and you answer questions, and then in the very back there are the answers, so that you have additional practice if you want. Those are not graded by us, but they are part of the readings. Next slide. One of the things we do that seems like magic is to pose really impossible questions and then show you how these things can be answered. And it is with the magic of the GPS that this is possible. one of the step-through items is, can you identify the people in this picture if the only thing I tell you about this picture is where it was taken? And ordinarily people think it's a trick question, but within 3 hours you will be able to name every person in this picture, and the only thing I'm going to tell you is where the picture was taken. True. Next slide. Our current faculty are nationally known lecturers, writers, and group leaders. Particularly proud of Julie Machuca, who took over from Tom Jones, who wrote the evidence evaluation and documentation module and does a brilliant job of teaching the most difficult of the modules. Next slide. So just to point these things out, this is an instructor-led course, the certificate course. It is not self-paced. You ought to be able to check in every day to keep track of the deadlines and see the discussions. It's asynchronous. That means you don't have to be in one place at a particular time every day, but you're going to want to see what people are doing periodically throughout the day or every day. There are ways to interact. There's a water cooler chat area. There's a formal chat area. There's discussion areas that are open in a timed manner within each module. And you can also use the internal messaging system to address the faculty, or some of the administration BU are present there, or to talk to your classmates or an individual classmate. We recommend you use Firefox or Google Chrome, and our online platform is Blackboard. Next slide. Each of these classes currently is held 3 times a year, and I'm going to turn this over, I think, to Carrie.
All right. Thank you so much, Melindy, for the very valuable review of the genealogy programs. I'm now going to turn this over to Carrie, the head of our enrollment team, to discuss the program schedule and the registration process. So thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you, Sarah. Our both online genealogy programs are offered 3 times each year. They are offered every January, every May, and every September. As we mentioned earlier today, our upcoming session starts on January the 16th of 2018, and the enrollment deadline is quickly approaching. It is December 15th. The tuition for the 4-week Genealogy Essentials course is $775, and the tuition for the 15-week Certificate in Genealogical Research is $2,695. We do offer a 10% tuition reduction if you are a member of any of these 4 groups. American Ancestors, commonly also referred to as New England Historical Genealogy Society, APG, Association of Professional Genealogists, NGS, the National Genealogy Society, and SCGS, Southern California Genealogical Society. If you do have any questions following this webinar, please feel free to contact us. We're here ready to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. You can reach us via email You can see our email address right there for you, via phone. And if you go onto our website, we also do have live chat available. So there's many different ways for you to reach out and ask us questions. And really, again, that's what we're here for. We want to answer your questions before you enroll in the course.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us today, and I'm going to hand it over as we start our Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Carrie. We have a question here from one of our audience members. She's saying, I have done a lot of research and have gone back 7 generations on my maternal grandfather's side of the family. However, I've never heard of GPS. Can I educate myself independently regarding the GPS and be ready for the certificate course? So Melindy, I will turn that over to you, please.
Yes, thank you. It sounds like you've done some good research and you've got some experience with records. And the GPS is fairly new in the last 10 years. It is a formalized structure for meeting standards of proof. And yes, you can read about it. And yes, I think you could become sufficiently familiar with it to apply it well in the certificate course. If you buy the book Genealogy Standards that was published by the Board for Certification of Genealogists in 2014, it was one of the earlier slides, it's spelled out very clearly right there, and you can also Google GPS and or look at the Board for Certification of Genealogists webpage where they have sample material where it's demonstrated. You'll also see it mentioned numerous times if you go to journals like the National Genealogical Society Quarterly, where the articles have to pass the standards for the GPS in order to be published. So there are a number of ways that you can go about doing that, and I recommend that you do.
Great, thank you. We have another question here from one of our audience members. How much time do I need to dedicate to the course? And Carrie, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. So for the 4-week Genealogy Essentials course, it's approximately 7 to 10 hours per week to be successful. And for the 15-week Certificate in Genealogical Research, the estimated time is approximately 14 to 16 hours per week. Again, both courses are asynchronous, so there is no set time of day or day of week that we require you to log in to do your work. So if you are an early bird, you can log in the morning. If you're a night owl, you can log in at night. It's completely up to you.
Great, thank you. Another question here are there any fees such as technology fee for the program? And to apply to either program, does someone need to submit a sealed transcript in order to be accepted? Carrie?
Sure thing. I will answer the first part about the transcript. No transcript is required to apply for the course. And the first part of the question was the technology fee. There are no additional fees besides the tuition fee. So you're going to have the tuition fee, and we did discuss the books. Students are responsible for purchasing the books for the course. So you're looking at tuition and books. There are no other fees.
Okay, and a second part to the question too, is there required travel involved to various institutions to meet the research course requirements? Melindy, I'll turn that one to you, please.
The only required travel is for the repository report, Other than that, you can absolutely do this all from a convenient location, any place that you've got an internet connectivity. The repository report means that you need to find a archive, or it could even be a library that has a vertical file that has materials that are original materials. They must not be like newspaper clippings or something that's been published in a book or even published online. It should not be online accessible. It needs to be maybe an unpublished diary, for instance. So yes, that is the one thing you must do outside, out and about, and hopefully you have one of those close to you.
All right, great, thank you. Another question comes in, where is the best place to purchase the course books? Carrie, I'll turn that one to you, please.
Sure thing, thank you. Really, we tell people that you can purchase the books from any reputable bookseller. So that could be anywhere from your local Barnes & Noble to Amazon, to sometimes the best prices can be the genealogical groups that we mentioned earlier. Sometimes they offer the books directly from their websites. So my best suggestions to all students is to quickly give the course book and the ISBN, that's that unique number that is associated with each book. Give it a quick Google to see what is the best price. And please pay close attention to the edition. It's important that you have the edition that we have noted in this webinar so that you're getting the most up-to-date book. Sometimes you can get a previous edition for much less money. However, you're going to have trouble following the assignments because page numbers won't match and some information has been updated from the previous edition.
All right, thank you. Another question comes in asking us just to reiterate how many hours per week this commitment is.
I can do that. So for the 4-week Genealogy Essentials course, the approximate time commitment is 7 to 10 hours per week. And for the longer, the 15-week, the certificate course in genealogical research, that's the advanced course, the approximate time commitment is 14 to 16 hours per week.
Great, thank you. We have a question asking, how does the certificate program prepare you for eventually obtaining a professional credential in genealogy? Melinda, I'm going to pass that one to you, please.
Certainly. The certificate program is based on the portfolio requirements for the Board for Certification of Genealogists for the CG, and so each module mirrors the information that you need to know to create a good portfolio that will pass those requirements. With the exception of the genetic genealogy material in the Module 4, which is not a requirement, but maybe someday, and for people who are serious practitioners, you really do need to know about genetic genealogy now. So in that way, you are seeing all the things that are required of a professional genealogist, and you will get practice, you'll get hands-on practice, you'll get feedback from your instructors, your facilitators, from your classmates, and you'll learn from all of us as we go through the different exercises. It's been compared to boot camp, and it can be quite intense, but it's definitely worthwhile.
Wonderful, thank you. Another attendee has stated that they have taken the online test for which program would be applicable for their particular skill set thus far, and has then gone straight to the certificate program. The question is, what are some of the key common hurdles or challenges students may face, and is there any advice that one would offer for this? And I will turn that to Melindy, please.
Very good. Excellent question, and hard to predict. It'll depend a lot on your experience level, perhaps with online education. There's a little bit of a learning curve to know where to look and where to be able to find announcements, where to find the calendar, where to find things like that. And we have very good people who can even predict whether you're having problems from some of your answers, perhaps, who will reach out and try to help if that happens. It'll depend too on your personal organization, your level of focus. If you are easily distracted into the myriad things that are out there that are so interesting that you'll want to follow up on all of them, that can be a real rabbit hole, and sometimes you have to just narrow your focus so that you can complete things in a reasonable length of time. And a lot of people discuss how they managed to do that or failed to do that as the deadlines for assignments come in, and there's not a lot of flexibility there. If you miss a deadline for an assignment, we're then in our discussions likely to be talking about the assignment, at which point we can't grade your assignment with the same points as we would someone who didn't have the advantage of the discussion. So organization would be key, and focus is going to be important. And always know that you can write to an individual instructor or facilitator and say, I didn't get that, where should I look for this? Is so-and-so right? Because your classmates are going to be saying things and you may not agree, and it's okay to cordially disagree, but sometimes they'll say something that isn't accurate and you need an instructor to correct them. So it's the usual set of challenges that anybody sitting in a classroom would have, plus a little bit of technology thrown in.
Wonderful, thank you. And Melinda, I think you might be surprised and happy to hear we have actually a journalist who's on the call as a shout out to Claudia, who's kind of chimed in.
Hooray, Claudia!
Yeah.
Terrific. I think journalists really are on the same page with genealogists, and I love to see that door open.
I know, that's great. Thank you, Claudia, for the shout out there. Another question comes in, and she's saying, I have been able to go back 7 generations with physical hands-on research. Also back 25 to 26 generations with Ancestry.com. What kind of payment can be charged? That one, I think I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly, but I would turn that over to Carrie.
Sure. So for registering for the course, you don't fill out an application. It's a straightforward registration that you can do on our website or over the phone with us. And payments are made via any major credit card, if I understand the question correctly. So you can use Visa, MasterCard, American Express, or Discover.
Great, thank you. This one very similar. Are there payment options for the course?
So currently, if you are looking, we do offer payment plans, let me say that. If you are looking at our upcoming January session, currently there is a 2-month payment plan available for people who enroll in November, and in December it would require a payment in full. We do offer longer payment plans, but those would not be for the January session. Those would be for the upcoming May 2018 session, which will be open for enrollment starting sometime during the month of November. As soon as it's up and available for enrollment, you will see it on our website. The course is also, and let me say specifically, the 15-week certificate course. You can also apply for what's called a Sallie Mae Smart Loan, and what that is, it is a government loan. It is separate from Boston University, so you would fill out an application on their website. They would do a credit check, and then they would approve you, and they would let you know what the interest rate would be. So that is an option. Sallie Mae Smart Loans, you can find the links on our website, or when you enroll in the shopping cart, right on the BU website, you will always see the option of a payment in full or whatever current payment plan is available. As I mentioned, for the month of November, it would be a 2-month payment plan. So you would pay half in November and half in December, and then the course starts in January.
Great, thank you, Carrie. The question comes in, do you need experience with DNA research before taking the certificate class? Melindy, please.
No, you do not. The autosomal DNA is the most difficult DNA to work with, and what we do is approach it more like you don't need to know how to build a car engine to drive a car. So what we do is show you what a chromosome match looks like with the colored blocks that I showed you earlier, and we give you a glossary of words that describe certain circumstances, and we treat you as though you had no experience with this. So we take you from A to about M in the alphabet of knowledge about autosomal DNA in the 3-week module. And by limiting it to one case, you can see some very simple variations. If you've already got some experience from doing a test and you don't know what to do with the test results, we can certainly solve those questions in the course of that 3-week module. Likewise, if you can acquire a copy of Genetic Genealogy in Practice and read through that in advance, you'll know what you're in for. This is a very well-written, straightforward presentation about a cutting-edge technology that is, to me, absolutely fascinating. And we take care not to leave anybody behind, even though there may be some students in the class who are very experienced with DNA. So it is geared to somebody who has no experience, but the readings are going to help a lot, especially if you do them in advance. And I'd also like to say that maybe part of the question, 2 questions back, might have been whether or not something about what you can charge once you are a practicing genealogist. Does anybody think that might have been what was being asked?
Yes, actually, I believe that was, I think the question got cut out there, but yes, that is the question, I believe.
Oh, well, I could take that too if you want me to.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, genealogists are reasonably well paid, and most of the beginning genealogists who have not published or done a lot of client work, who come out of the certificate program, are really in a position to charge about $40 an hour and to give their clients good value for that money. The more experienced ones charge more like an attorney, and you can see up to about $200 an hour, depending on what area and the level of difficulty. So ordinarily, you probably will see people charging in the range of $60 to $80 an hour, and if they have credentials, it can be higher.
Wonderful, thank you. A question here for Carrie. I am currently interested in the January session. When should I enroll?
Thank you, Sarah. For anyone who is interested in the upcoming January session, there are limited spaces left for this particular session. So I would highly recommend enrolling sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of minutes left here, so I'll run through a few final questions. This one here is, what is a good step to take after completing the certification? Melindy, please.
Well, you've got a lot of choices these days, and I would recommend that you stay close with the alumni group, because they're going in some really interesting directions. They're expanding into a closed Google group where they're doing problem solving and really cutting edge stuff. I would recommend that you search out the ProGen study group if you haven't already taken that. They will be using a new text soon. There are also a number of study groups that will examine articles and wrangle over whether the GPS was met or not, and rewrite things and do further research. There are not, that I know of, problem-solving groups that are doing work on problems outside of client work. But I think that will be something that comes in the near future. There are groups like the Adoption Angels who will work with genetic genealogy results to try to help people, or even outside of the genetic genealogy results, using the paper trail methods that have always been used. And I think if you Google genealogy angels or genealogy volunteering, you'll see that there are people who help identify bodies that turn up in state morgues, for instance, things where you're not going to get paid, that you can volunteer and get experience from. Or you can simply pose questions to yourself and practice that way. One thing that's fairly unfair, if you have no experience beyond the certificate course, no experience working with clients, and you take a case from, you know, somebody who's got German ancestry and wants to know, if you don't have specific subject knowledge about that area, you're not doing yourself or the client any good. So be sure that you are knowledgeable in the subject area as well as in the methods that you've been taught.
Thank you for that explanation, Melindy. We have time for just one more question here, and this question will go to you, Melindy. Our audience member is asking, I am currently looking into my own family. Do these courses or the various organizations mentioned have best practices with looking internationally? Second part to that, following that up, is I have family that came to the United States just before World War I and just after World War II from both Eastern and Western Europe. I am wondering how these mysteries are solved between the language barriers and name changes.
Well, if you take the certificate course, there are individuals in Germany and Poland who are graduates of this class. I'm taking the second part of this first. I think that you would find them to be very willing to help guide you and very knowledgeable about sources in their nearby repositories in their country. Many of them do translation as well. Several of our instructors can translate Eastern European languages, and you shouldn't be shy about asking for help. Can you repeat the first part of it about international something?
Yes, basically they're asking, do these courses or various organizations mentioned have best practices with looking internationally?
There are applications of the GPS for doing research in foreign countries, and since you're talking mostly about Europe in this question, you should be aware that there are ethical issues as well, especially for the time frames you're talking about and the ones after World War II. In Europe, there is some countries have adopted the right to be forgotten. And so countries like Germany, for instance, and Argentina, which tells you something right there, these are basically strong excuses for war crimes never to be prosecuted. It is illegal in some of these countries to take a genetic genealogy test for genealogy, other than medical reasons, because people are hiding and they don't want things to be known. And so you have the ethical question of, do you break a law or do you not? And some of that is touched on, not a lot, but if you bring it up in Ask the Instructor, which is one of the discussion groups, you may get a very thorough answer, and you may get quite a lot of discussion from your classmates and instructors. So I do recommend that you not go through the whole course looking for those things. Make them happen by asking the question.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for your wealth of information today. It's all the time we have for questions. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our enrollment team here at the telephone number provided or the email provided here. We'll be happy to answer all questions. Thank you all for joining, and have a wonderful day.